The decline of the Zack Snyder DCEU continues with the latest installment of a movie that, based on all accounts, they desperately needed to be a financial hit. We finally, after, I've lost track, what is it, 5-6 years? I've lost track with how many times they've delayed this movie. Andy Muschietti's The Flash, if we can even call it that, starring Ezra Miller, which, to nobody's shock, has adapted the very, very popular Flashpoint paradox. Well, later on in this episode, I'll also be talking a little bit about the Pixar release this weekend, Elemental, and how it may not be as bad as the critics are saying. I'm joined once again by Dontre James, a.k.a. Tarantino, and Joe, a.k.a. Unyolo Movie Reviews. Guys, you ready to finally talk about The Flash?
Let's go.
Let's do this. What is going on, everybody? Happy to have you guys back. Happy to be back on another episode of our summer series with probably one of the most hotly anticipated movies of the year so far, potentially. I don't know. I just want to gauge your guys' thoughts. Just after everything that's been going on with DC, the reshuffle of James Gunn, everything that's been happening, the fact that we basically have an entire slate of movies that were set to come out this year that were ultimately meaningless because they were going to get wiped off the board once the big reshuffle happened. I need to get your guys' thoughts on what the anticipation level was going into this movie before we wind back the clock and start to talk about all the origins of the problems with it. And I'm going to start with you. What was your general anticipation going into The Flash?
Yeah, I think I was lucky because I wasn't really hoping to see this movie. I didn't care. From all the characters that we got introduced by Zack Snyder, Ezra Miller for me was the one I liked the least, even before all the stuff that he went on his personal life. I just thought it was a bit awkward. I didn't like how he portrayed the Flash and stuff. So I was surprised when I went into the movie because it was a lot better than I expected on that. So I think for a lot of people, they were expecting, especially after the first critics started saying it was the best comic book ever, I think anticipation was really high, and for some people that didn't work really well. For me, it was a nice surprise, but I wasn't expecting it. It wasn't one of the movies I really wanted to see from the DC. It's been a while since I want to see something. So, I think for me that worked in the favor of the movie.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you had people like James Gunn, Tom Cruise. You have all these executives coming out saying this is the greatest superhero movie ever made. And I'm just sitting there being like, did you guys not watch Dark Knight? Did you guys not watch the Snyder Cut? Did you guys not watch any of these other I'm missing a bunch here, but I'm like Zack Snyder's Watchmen, which is in my opinion a much better movie. I'm like, did you guys not watch any of it? And I get it, they're doing it in order to sell the movie because Warner Brothers desperately needs this movie to be a hit. But Dontre, it's funny because as much as we talked about all the superhero stuff that was coming out, I don't actually remember us talking a whole lot about The Flash and just what our general anticipation for what this movie was. I guess because it didn't really become such a big deal until this year, really, I feel because it was supposed to come out last year and then it got delayed a little bit. So what was your general anticipation going into this? Because I think the only thing we talked about was we knew this was going to be Flashpoint.
Yeah, no, we talked about the Flash movie before and how the Flash movie really needed to hit. And for me personally, I don't think the movie hit at all. Just looking at from as a fan of the Flash and the character and all its history and what it's known about, I really just think that the movie just didn't hit. So going into the movie, my expectations were kind of low because one, I just didn't like Ezra Miller as the Flash. And I have to agree with what Unyolo says. Going into that, looking at his the Justice League movie, I don't think he portrayed what Barry Allen and Slash the Flash should have been. And yeah, people are gonna be like, oh, it should have been Grant Gustin. I'm not on that train either because I'm not a fan of keeping the same person. But it would have, given that what happened in his personal life, it would have been better to just be you know what, we're gonna use Grant Gustin as a plot point right here and just move on with the rest of the movie. And I just would have completely recasted Ezra Miller.
Yeah, I think the issue that comes from that is that at the point in the production when all the problems that Ezra, we're going to go over that because the timeline of production for this movie is one of the most fascinating timelines for it. Because like I said, this goes so far beyond a movie that just got delayed because of COVID, which was the latest thing that happened. But like this movie is gonna go down in history as like one of the most waylaid productions ever. I believe that. So the origin and inception of this movie goes back, I want to say, to like 2017, 2018, right in the wake of Batman versus Superman, right before the whole Justice League debacle happened, when they announced the whole DC verse, which if memory serves, it was going to be in the build up to Justice League 2. It was going to be Wonder Woman 2, the solo Batman movie that Affleck was going to direct and star in, Green Lantern, Cyborg, Flash, Aquaman, and then they were going to cap it with Justice League 2 and 3. Then, obviously, the Justice League thing happens. And the issue is that when the Snyder thing happened, the issue I feel like with a lot of these movies that we've gotten in the post-Snyder Sons of 2017, with the exception of Shazam, is almost all of those characters were cast solely by Snyder to be supporting characters in Justice League. So I feel like that may have contributed a little bit as to why certain of these characters haven't necessarily worked. You know, I know a lot of people are a big fan of Jason Momoa. Yeah, the whole Ray Fisher, anti-Warner Brothers thing that happened. Gal Gadot obviously has been a tremendous success. But the thing is that, like, all of these actors were cast specifically by Snyder. And talking about Ezra Miller, because you needed a little bit of, like, a gap between, like, you know, okay, you got four dudes that are all, like, 6'6", jacked, and, like, have, like, not the most interesting and charismatic personalities. And Wonder Woman, you need someone with a little humor to balance it out. So, like, I definitely understand the intention with going for a more comedic, more immature version of the character, despite the fact that that's definitely not the most comic accurate, because despite, obviously, you know, all the tragedy that Barry Allen has been through, he's not, him always kind of being treated as the quote-unquote funny man of the Justice League. He's never really been, like, not to the level of, like, how Ezra Miller portrayed him. Now, I think that, unfortunately, like many, many other things, he got screwed over by Joss Whedon's handling when Joss Whedon was brought in to essentially turn that movie into the Avengers and failed miserably of it. I think that while the Snyder Cut improved on a lot of things, including Miller's performance, just because of, like, how it utilized him, I definitely understood people's problems with that. So this movie was originally supposed to be directed by Rick Famuyiwa, who famously walked off the project. This was also during the late 2010s when DC, similar to Lucasfilm, was just losing directors left and right. They went through a couple different directors. For a while, it didn't even seem like this movie was going to be happening. I think they were considering Gore Verbinski at one point. I'm trying to look here. I don't see any other directors. I think Robert Zemeckis and Matthew Vaughn were also considered. They considered Sam Raimi, Mark Webb, Jordan Peele, Ben Affleck. They were struggling to find directors. And it didn't really kick off again until February of 2018 when John Francis Daly and Jonathan Goldstein of Spider-Man Homecoming, Game Night, and most recently Dungeons & Dragons fame came on to do a rewrite of the script. And then finally, hopping off the success of It Chapter 2, they were able to lock down director Andres Muschetti. So they basically finally got production going. Then now this is where the timeline gets a little bit confusing for me, because I don't remember if it's the problems with Ezra behind the scenes started or if it was COVID that happened first. But reports start coming out. You have the video that comes out of Ezra choking the woman on screen. Supposedly he kidnapped someone. There's a potential grooming scandal going on. It's just nonstop craziness. And then COVID happens. And I have to assume that they were considering firing him and recasting him at a certain point. I can't imagine that wasn't floated, just based off of, like, you know, forget the mental health stuff for a second. Just like it was slowly becoming like a PR nightmare. Yeah. So that had to have been floated at least one point, but I'm assuming that COVID put a halt to it, because when COVID happened, everything gets put in flux, everything gets delayed. They're like, okay, we got to shelve this thing. We got to see if, like, anything can come out, see if anything can start to make money. And everything that happened with COVID that we've already talked about to death happens. And so finally, they're able to get this movie up and running. And by then, you know, you have the Warner Brothers CEO reshuffle. You have the James Gunn thing coming in. Essentially, their entire universe that they tried to continue on past Snyder, even though they were essentially, it's always been like the weirdest thing with these last couple string of movies that we've gotten. And the Snyder Cut being released on HBO Max, now titled Max, didn't help one bit, where they were essentially trying to continue Snyder's verse without actually having Zack Snyder there. So, like, you still had Jason Momoa's Aquaman, you still had Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman, you still were planning to do Ezra Miller's Flash, you still have Ben Affleck's Batman popping up in random things here and there. You know, the Suicide Squad, despite being directed by Gunn, is still canonically tied to the Snyderverse because of the inclusion of Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn. And then you have Shazam, who was entirely original because he, I believe, was the only character that Snyder had not originally planned for. So you have essentially this weird quasi attempted to continue the Snyderverse without actually having Zack Snyder involved. And now we're at the point where James Gunn famously came out when he was announced as the co-CEO of the new Warner Brothers regime under David Zaslav, along with Peter Saffron, where he's like, yeah, we're essentially rebooting it. We're wiping it off the board. We're starting from scratch. But the issue is that, and Yolo, you and I have talked about this as well previously, is that Warner still had their 5 movies that they needed to get out. They needed to get out Black Adam. They had Shazam 2, Aquaman 2, Blue Beetle, I believe, was filmed during COVID, and Flash. So they needed to get all of these movies out, and they needed to make sure that they were going to at least be of some financial success to the studio, which has been just losing money left and right, seemingly nonstop since last year, since the Zaslav takeover. So now, after all of that being said, you have the movie come out, and I think for me, speaking personally, I think my biggest surprise was that I didn't hate it. I'm still in this weird position where I don't know if I definitely don't love it, but I don't hate it. I think there are things to enjoy here for sure, despite this not being the best movie. So let's start it there. So your guys, starting with Dontre this time, your general overall thoughts on the movie and the story.
I think I have to echo some of the points that you mentioned. I don't necessarily love the movie. It's not like something that one of my favorite superhero movies. It's tolerable. Like it's, it doesn't look that great, the CGI problems obviously, but given that it's the Flash, we already know going in it's going to be a huge CGI movie.
Right.
Overall, the plot point, yeah, we understood that it was Flashpoint, but I don't think they really caught the concept of Flashpoint. Flashpoint is literally supposed to change everything and go on into what the comic verse was Rebirth, and just kind of go into that. And I don't really feel like they even left it as even though we're not going to get another movie anytime soon, they didn't even really hit on that point to be like, okay, like this is what the new world is. Or actually, that's exactly what they did, moving into what James Gunn's universe is going to be now, DC universe. But so it's just, I don't know. I'm really surprised. Again, like this movie did come out. I really thought this movie was going to get shelved, just like the Batwoman movie. I thought that was really going to get shelved and just be like, yeah, well, we may see it on a streaming site, and we take the loss for the money, because as of now, this box office opening, it was terrible. Like it it didn't really hit at all. And I think a lot of people, I think there's people that just won't support the movie because of Ezra Miller.
Right.
But that's also mixing it. But also just like, I think from a viewer standpoint, I didn't really like the movie, but I enjoyed it. It was a good, my turn my brain off movie, and then just kind of just sit there and relax and watch it. But it had its fun moments, but I think that it could have been really, conceptualized a lot better than what it did.
Yeah, for sure. Yolo, your general thoughts on the movie.
Yeah, I just think that his biggest advantage is like straight from the start with that, like I'm going to talk spoilers, but like
by all means, go right ahead.
That baby scene that was so ridiculous of the babies coming out of the building. I think straight from the point, he just told everyone, look, this is going to be a joke. Go with it. Don't take it serious. And I think that's what helped me a lot, because I think if they went into the movie going really serious and like, we're going to take this as like a good superhero dark movie, like no, they straight away with the CGI, with the whole ridiculous of the baby in the microwave. I was watching, I was like, okay, so this is the kind of movie that's going to be, so I'm all for it. And I think that was what helped me a lot. I just took it as being some kind of movie that is not going to affect anything coming in the future, because it's going to stop there. But he gave me the opportunity of seeing like Michael Keaton again. He gave me the opportunity of seeing a really cool Supergirl. He gave me the opportunity to see some stuff that I wanted to see. So I just didn't took it serious, and I had fun. And I think that's the thing. My rating for the movie was more about the fun I had with it than if I was going to pick point on it, on the CGI, on the acting, on the storytelling, on like everything was so stupid that I just had fun with it, and I just turned off my brain, like you guys were saying. I think that's the biggest advantage that he has compared with, for example, Black Adam, that he takes it itself a little bit too serious, and The Rock is like, look how cool I am, and he looks ridiculous, and he just doesn't like all gel in. So this, like, he really like gave us moments. and again, going in spoilers, Nicolas Cage as Superman, like that
That
for
was
me
dope to
is
see.
enough.
Yeah, that was cool. That was cool.
That for me was worth the like going to the cinema and watching it. And that's the thing, like a lot of these movies, you come out and there's nothing really that you can go to people and say, look, there's something really cool in it. And that bit, it was like awesome to see. So I just had fun, and that's my like overall it's a fun movie, and it doesn't deserve everyone like shitting on it like it's the worst thing in the world, because it's not. And it's a lot of fun, like stupid fun, but fun.
Yeah. It's like I've actually had this conversation with a couple of other people going before this podcast, which is like, again, just based off the Ezra Miller bias alone and the previous, more in a weird way, I think more so the Ezra Miller bias than the DC bias, which is that that people were just ready to review bomb this. Like, I've been seeing this trend. It started in the fall of last year, but it's really been the case this year with some movies that deserve it, some that it's like, I'm just like, yeah, like where they're not even willing to give it a chance before it comes out. Like Quantumania, like stupid and terrible as that movie was, it's like at the very least wait until the freaking movie comes out to review it, you know. But it's like people were just like ready to review bomb it when it came out. My whole thing is, it's like and I don't know what this says about like my relationship with the previous couple of DC movies, but I think the worst part was that like the opening of the movie happened like with that opening action sequence in the DC verse, and my first thought was, I'm like, wow, this weirdly doesn't suck. I mean, like yes, absolutely. The CG is bad for sure. Like that, the CG is like beyond terrible. But I'm like, I can tell like what this action sequence is like in terms of like this like being like a meetup of like the Justice League. Like you got Batman, you got Gal Gadot in there for like 5 seconds, like him and Ezra Miller, like they're doing a mission, and like also the fact that they're like now acknowledging the Snyder Cut as canon. I'm like, okay, like. So first off, I'm like, so Muschetti is like paying homage to Batman. Paying homage to Snyder with this. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, as ridiculous and nonsensical as this action is, I'm already into it. And the other thing that I thought going in was, I'm like, wow. I'm like, Ezra, even though he's still being like goofy Ezra, he's definitely taking this a lot more serious. Like, he's not cracking jokes. He's kind of slightly irritated. He feels like he's not being taken seriously. I'm like, he's grappling like with a decent amount of stuff. You're seeing him like in his job and in his life. I'm like, wait, this movie is like doing what a movie is supposed to. It's actually taking the time to set up and establish its character. So I think in a weird way, a lot of the bias towards this movie is actually preventing people from seeing its good points, which for my money at least, even though again I said this is not even close to being my favorite superhero movie of the year and is not even close to being the best superhero movie of all time, I was still able to see, I'm like, wow, this movie is already doing what so many of the other DC movies have just failed to do, you know? Like, I think if you're going to compare this directly to something like to the two that we got before this, that being Shazam! Fury of the Gods and Black Adam, those two movies, if you just look at like the opening 10 minutes, especially if you take Black Adam and how that whole opening act is a complete mislead, like the movies do a terrible job of establishing their main characters. I'm like, what the hell do we know about these guys at all? Now, Shazam's a sequel, so that gets a little bit of a pass, although just the movie itself that just turned out to be just generic and terrible. But I'm like, this movie is already light years ahead of what those other two movies were doing, and that's before we even get into the Flashpoint stuff in terms of like, you know, how it goes through the story. But in terms of this setting up and introducing us, I'm like, okay, this is who Barry Allen is. This is going to be his conflict, is this thing with his mom. I actually think that, like, in a weird way, the scenes that he has with Ben Affleck are probably some of the best scenes in the movie, where they are talking about how they're both kind of motivated by the death of their parents. I'm like, what the I was almost like in a fever dream, where I'm like, the actual storytelling that is going on is in such harsh contrast to the visuals, which are this weird mix of, like, in a weird way, similar to the Justice League cut, 1 second Snyder, and then the next minute, like, goofy, terrible looking CG, that I'm almost like in like a fever dream, where I'm like trying to comment. I'm like, this is like actually good. And I'm also expecting that when the jokes come in, and there are a lot of moments where the movie just straight pauses to just deliver a joke sequence. It's not like a Marvel thing where it's just like snappy, quippy one-liners 1 minute. Like, they straight up just pause the movie in order to have like comedy scenes there. I think the reason why they work for me and they are not as jarring and as distracting is because they're actually doing what you're supposed to do with most comedy scenes, which is the thing that most Marvel movies miss, which is that the characters are not in on the joke. They're playing up the situations as being humorous and ridiculous, but the characters themselves are taking it seriously. It's funny. I was actually I was listening to an interview with Bryan Cranston the other day, and he was talking about like what it is that sets doing a sketch apart from doing an actual comedic role. And he's like, the whole thing is that like when you're doing a sketch and you're in on the joke, that makes the audience laugh because it's for live performance. It's for like, it's for like, it's almost like an interaction, with the audience. But when you're doing something for film where you have no interaction with the audience and where the audience is supposed to be like buying into a completely different experience, if you are playing into the joke, that robs the audience of having the ability to actually like and enjoy and laugh at it. You're robbing them of the emotion that they are supposed to feel. And that, I think, is what separates that. Now, again, that's a little bit of a stretch, given that, again, these aren't the most funny scenes, but it's able to allow me to buy into the certain sequences of, like, when he loses his powers and he's trying to vibrate. Like, he's taking that situation serious. Like, he doesn't understand what's going on or how he's lost his powers. But the situation we're watching is ridiculous. And so we're laughing at it as it's meant to happen. So that, I think, is already what sets this movie apart just from the last couple. And if we're getting into Ezra, I mean, the problem is that Ezra has been too weighed down by the stuff that's been going on in his personal life and the fact that he has now been playing in not only this franchise, but another gigantic, disastrous live-action franchise that Warner Brothers have done over the last couple of years, the Fantastic Beasts movies, which you had a third Fantastic Beasts movie that came out last year that not a single person that I know watched or reviewed at all. And he has been in those two franchises for the last, what is it, like 6-7 years now, I think, since like 2016, 2017. That people forget that when Ezra came on the scene in the early 2010s as like part of like that wave of like that indie boom of actors with movies like We Need to Talk About Kevin, like The Perks of Being a Wallflower, he's a fucking really good actor and gives a phenomenal performance in both of those movies. So I chalk that up to him being another victim of the indie stars that are then scooped up by the Hollywood blockbuster system that tries to make traditional movie stars out of them, but their talents aren't necessarily situated out of them, and how they essentially try to turn him into the Peter Parker of the Justice League in that movie that I feel like didn't really allow people to actually understand his talents as an actor. And I think that this is probably the first instance where I actually buy him as an actor, where, okay, I may not necessarily buy him as Barry Allen, but I buy him like he's, to me at least, I think he's giving an incredible performance. And the fact that he really is carrying most of this movie, like a lot of people are going to talk about Michael Keaton and a lot of people are going to talk about Sasha Calle, even when they're in the movie and they're in the movie for the whole second hour, they're really not in it that much. It still very much is Barry's story. Now, a lot of people are saying that they don't think that Ezra is compelling enough to carry the whole movie. And I personally just have to disagree because all of the personal bias aside, I think Ezra gave a really, really, really good performance. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
Yeah, like I wrote on my review, he really surprised me because of how he acted as Barry, because I always knew he was a great actor. We have to talk about Kevin is like an amazing performance. But I think the issue here is like, and I think some young actors, like you said, that come from these indie movies, they have to take some responsibility too. You have to be clever enough to pick your roles. And the thing is, if you see all of the body of work of Ezra, nothing makes you think, oh, this is going to be the funny guy of the team. This is going to be. So when he looks at that character, he looks at the script, he looks at that, and he needs to think about it and say, look, is this a good role for me to take? And I think we have the example of some people like Leonardo DiCaprio and stuff that got offered a lot of roles that were like big roles, one of them being Spider-Man. Yep. And he said no.
And Anakin Skywalker as well.
Yeah, and he said no because he knew that wouldn't fit what he wanted to do. So Ezra, I think he took on this role and then he kind of discovered that it didn't really fit with him. And I never felt that he really wanted to play that character until this movie. And why? Because on this movie, they give him a lot of more space to go into the dramatic, going into the lost, going into the pain. And that's what he's really good at doing. Because every time that he's playing silly on this movie, and for me, that after credit scene, oh my God, I was crying.
I read about that, and I'm like, no, I don't need to stick around for this. I'm like,
yeah, but that after credit scene,
especially with the way they end the movie, which we'll get into that when we talk about it. I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on that. But like, yeah, the way that they ended, you're like, yeah, this is done for.
Even Ezra, he looks ashamed of playing that part of the Barry Allen. He doesn't want to play that part. He wants to play the scene of with the mom in the supermarket. That's the scene that he really knows how to play. That's the pain and all that. So I think from the start, and I think you hit the nail on the head when you talked about Peter Parker. The problem with DC is DC is trying to be Marvel. And this is a problem that like if you're a big comic book guy, there's a big difference between DC and Marvel. All the characters, everything there. So when you have someone in DC that does not understand that those characters are in the core very, very different, and you can't copy what Marvel is doing and bring it in. Like the Flash is not Spider-Man, okay? Is the most relaxed guy. Yeah, of course, because you have like guys like Batman, guys like Green Lantern, like stuff like that are a bit more darker and stuff. And then you bring the Flash. Yeah, it is a lot lighter, but it's still not like Spider-Man. And what they tried to do here is like they were looking into the Marvel thing and saying, hey, shit, we need a Spider-Man. Who is Spider-Man here? Oh, let's put Flash. And I think that is the biggest problem here. They keep on doing this. They keep on trying to be something they're not. And the other thing that I think shows that problem is you can't have the same guy. I don't care how talented you are. You can't have the same director that does the Flash now being picked to do the Batman. They're so very different. So
especially after we already got a really good Batman movie that some people are already hailing as like being way more faithful to the character than anything that could possibly come later on.
And thank God. But look, I thank God that Matt Reeves probably told them like, no, you're not touching my Batman. Go and get your own. Thank God, because they would screw it up. But the thing is, for me, if you got this guy to do the Flash, and you thought he was the right guy, there's no way now you can pick him to do Batman. And I think that's the biggest problem with DC. They are not picking people that really love these characters. They're like picking anyone that will take on the role. Like you said, they asked everyone around the world if they wanted to do the Flash. They never like found the right person that understands the character. And I think that's something that it is the biggest difference here. If you look at Marvel, when they got James Gunn to do Guardians of the Galaxy, when they got Taika Waititi to do Thor and stuff, those are guys that really had some ideas to make those characters interesting. This guy's here, I don't know. I can't say if he's a Flash fan or not, but if he's like a big Flash fan and he wanted to do this movie, now he's doing the Batman, and that really confuses me. I think that keeps on being the problem with DC. They're just trying too much, and I think with James Gunn, they're probably going to get a little bit better. But again, I think the movies that we're going to get from James Gunn that are going to be interested are not going to be the Supermans or the Flashes or the Batmans. It's going to be the weird things like Suicide Squad. Today they were talking about a movie about the Rogue
Commandos, all that stuff. The fact that we're getting a Waller show before we're getting like all that stuff. Yeah, Dontre, what are your thoughts on that?
On the stuff that we're getting from James Gunn?
Yeah, well, the stuff that we're getting on James Gunn, because I think personally that like one of the biggest issues as well is the fact that if James Gunn had hated this movie, because you notice James Gunn was only talking about this movie. He wasn't talking about this with Shazam, with Blue Beetle, with Aquaman, none of that stuff, you know? And those movies have their bevy of problems to deal with. But like the problem is that James Gunn has been praising the shit out of this movie. Now, whether he actually likes it or not, or whether he just has to because he's the new head of DC and he's under an obligation to, that I don't know. But I listened to him on the Michael Rosenbaum podcast, and he seems to genuinely like the movie. So I think that's the biggest problem going in, is the fact that whatever the case may be, he seems to have liked what Muschetti did with this, apparently specifically with the Michael Keaton Batman sequences, because again, because he's the guy now that's the latest Batman director. So
no, I think when you look at what James Gunn has done with his films, the Flash movie kind of goes up his alley. However, despite however I feel about the movie, first thing I would say, when I first saw the suit on Ezra Miller, I was like, this is giving me Green Lantern CGI like skin suit thing. And I was like, this is weird, but you know what? It's funny. Like, it's funny. You know, like he looks hella uncomfortable in the suit, almost to the same point where what's his name? Christian Bale was like complaining about being stiff in the Batman suit. But yeah, no, honestly, I think this movie, like, the reason why I think James Gunn is like praising this movie so heavy is because it's kind of up his alley, like a little bit. Um, Given that now, I still don't know. I don't remember much of what DC is coming out, but to talk on like this director now being the person to lead the Batman Brave and the Bold movie,
Yeah.
I don't know how I feel about that. Like, I just you need to start finding in it to kind of echo what I forgot your name. Sorry,
Unyolo.
Okay.
Unyolo. Like, what he said is just like they really didn't find directors at all that really were passionate about the project. And they just looked for someone just like and threw a number at them, was like, we'll give you this much money to do this movie. They just wanted to get the movie in and out. And I really think like we need like they are trying to copy what Marvel's doing. And that's been something that DC has been doing for years. Till this day, like I'll still defend Man of Steel as one of the best DC movies that came out in this like that past decade. But it's also just like he was really passionate about that movie, and he was like, I want to make this movie. That's fine. But like for this director, I think moving forward, I think they really need to find directors who are that knows the source material, at least knows the source material, and really passionate about it. Now, just trying to get one person to do now this movie and now a whole another DC character is completely different, and I think it's just set up to fail because Batman is a completely different character from the Flash. A lot more serious, a lot more darker. This was very lighthearted, and maybe this is up his alley, but at the end of the day, you can't just do both.
Right.
And I believe that movie is going to suffer and it's going to fail because you're going to try to change Batman. And we all know how Batman fans are. Like,
oh yeah,
you can't just insult Batman fans and get away with it.
Yeah. To echo the Marvel versus DC sentiments again, and I know I've talked about this before, but the biggest difference always is that during those peak years of Marvel, I'll say like right around like 2014 is when it started, because that's when they got the Russo brothers and James Gunn, which is where Marvel really took off post the Avengers. But like, I mean, you can even make the argument too with Whedon and Favreau is that they got legitimately talented filmmakers who had only had like a number of projects under their belt, but experience-wise, like they had done the rounds. They had worked in the industry. They knew their way around. Like Favreau had been making a couple indie movies. He had been an actor for a decade before that, so he knew his way around. Same thing with Whedon, who had been working for years on TV with Buffy and with Firefly. You know, you get the Russos, who had been working for years on shows like Arrested Development and Community, but he knew what they were capable of action-wise. Gunn, you know, as a filmmaker. And then obviously once you get later on, when you get Taika and Coogler, who were already a little bit established, Marvel has always been so good at, like you guys were saying, getting the right director for the job, where a director who, again, they may not necessarily be that well known, but as far as like workhorses and as far as being really fucking talented, they get the job done. And DC has always just been, what number can we throw at a filmmaker in order to make this happen? And it's a lot more corporate, and the directors don't really have time to execute on the visions, and that's just been the case. And the thing that made Snyder's different is, like you were saying, Dontre, Snyder treats Man of Steel even differently from most of his movies. He's treating that movie like an art film. That movie is not a superhero movie. That movie is like that movie is an art film. It is an existentialist crisis movie. And that's, again, what so many people misunderstood about it when they first came out. And that's why you've seen such this massive revisionist thing. And the fact that he was setting that up and had this grand scale vision. Certain things about it just didn't work for me personally. I'm still not a fan of Batman versus Superman, but at the very least, you could tell the reason why people keep going back to Snyder stuff as opposed to all this other DC stuff is because you could tell that is somebody who cared and was passionate and really was putting their all into that, versus all of these other ones, which really do, the more and more that just come out, feel like just corporatized products, you know, which you can make the argument for a lot of the stuff that's of the blockbusters that have come out recently. But with DC in particular, it's like, there's a reason why these fans have been so pissed off, because you got a fan base that's arguably on the level of Marvel, if not bigger, and they are constantly feeling like their characters are just being done dirty, you know? Like, I'm sorry, but like the fact that Black Adam was the way that it was, like, come on. And you have The Rock out there saying, oh yeah, I've been trying to do this for 10 years and whatnot. It's like, okay, sit down. So Dontre, now we got to talk about Flashpoint, because we've been talking about this really like since the first trailer came out. Like we both kind of figured out early on that they were doing Flashpoint with this. I always thought that like it was a mistake to do such a big event this early, especially because we hadn't gotten a solo movie with this character yet. And after a certain point, with the way they were positing these movies, like kind of being like, kind of sort of pretty much the end of the DCEU as we've known it. The thing, all as far as the capitulation of all the movies we've gotten since Man of Steel. Now the trailers came out and like certain things are different. It's Michael Keaton's Batman instead of Thomas Wayne. It's Supergirl instead of Superman. Instead of the Atlantean Amazonian War, they're just repeating the events of Man of Steel, all that. But in terms of like, in a weird way, despite the events being different, in terms of like getting the beats down, like the emotional story beats of Flashpoint, in terms of he's sad about his mom, he realizes he has this ability to go back and change. He doesn't know exactly what it's going to do, but he feels like he needs to do it just to see if he can. And he does, but the consequences of such are so much more dire to the point where it's literally like going to destroy the world. And I think in this, and then as far as like getting the ending right, because I will say that during the final third act battle, the emotional beats that happened were not all what I was expecting, where he realizes that any chance of saving this world while also resetting the timeline is going to be futile. So he essentially has to sacrifice this new world that he's created in order to get the old world back. I personally thought that they hit the beats well, you know, in terms of the straight adaptation, yeah, but in terms of just hitting all those beats of the story, I personally thought they did a good job.
Yeah. I think, you know, and again, I think I said this before. My biggest issue with the movie is because the villain that knocked him out of the Speed Force,
yeah,
was the rival.
Right.
As a Flash fan, I really think. Well, let me scratch that for a second. The overall like theme of the movie, I think they missed a really what could have been a good point. And like, you know, Unyolo was speaking about how like what Ezra Miller does as an actor is really passionate and like really like, I'm forgetting words here. I really think they should have did Reverse Flash.
Yeah. Yeah.
And seeing how much Reverse Flash actually hates, like Earbard, how he hates
right.
Barry Allen would have been a better dynamic, and then just going to get a copy of him and just like have him experience everything and becoming the rival essentially.
Right. So that was the rival, not the Black Flash.
No, that was the rival. So
okay.
like that, the whole thing about the rival is just pretty much so like a fanboy that just like wants to be Barry Allen's nemesis, even though we all know that the Reverse Flash is
right
the main nemesis of the Flash.
Right.
Yeah, I love how I'm gonna crack a joke here, but I love how the Man of Steel is their canon event for everything.
Right. It literally is. I mean, we said that from the trailer. We're like, wow, they still are like almost acknowledging now that they have never made a movie as a corporation in this new way better than Man of Steel. So they literally have to bring it back to it as every time. They can't get away from it.
You know, and it was really interesting, and you know, it was just like. Overall, like I think that was like my biggest thing. It's like again, and like I feel like it would have told a better story understanding like why Earbar is doing the way he did. And like, but again, we got this version, which wasn't all that bad. I don't think the world would have been ready to see like an Atlantean like war like, right now.
Right.
Or, you know, and I think again, kudos to Sasha Calle for playing Supergirl. Like that was great. Like she was great. Also seeing Michael Keaton again was great, and that ending too. We definitely have to talk about that.
Yeah, we'll
seeing
talk about
Clooney
that.
Again. We'll
talk about that because I'm just like
insane.
I'm still trying to figure out what the purpose of that scene was, especially considering that was an obvious reshoot, and I actually know what the original scene was supposed to be back when they were gonna make more movies in this universe after this, before the Gunn Peter Saffron reshuffling. But table that one. But so Dontre, this I'm actually interested in because Yolo, I know you professed that you were a big Michael Keaton fan, so you are a fan of Michael Keaton as Batman.
Yeah, no, like I love like Michael Keaton. For me, is still the best Batman.
The only reason why I bring that up is because I don't know if I've made this clear before. I'm not saying that I don't like him, but I have personally never understood why people say that he's the best Batman. Because to me, and I know that you two are both going to disagree with Dontre, I know because you and I have argued about this a lot. Bale to me is still like the GOAT, God tier. That is my idea of Batman. No one is ever going to touch him. And obviously, like, I watched the Keaton movies, but like, even as like movies and performance wise, I'm just like, I didn't get it. Like they're good Tim Burton movies, but like as far as being like the gold standard of Batman, I'm like, they don't have the noir edge. They don't. It's like a Tim Burton costume party that I'm watching most of the time. And it's not that I don't like that, but I'm like, the people saying that like that is the definitive version of Batman. That I've never understood personally, because I'm like, I feel like that. I'm like, that's not adapting Grant Morrison's run well. I have all what's it called? Who's the guy that wrote Long Halloween? Is that Grant Morrison or is that somebody else? Anyway, I'll come back to that. But like Jeff Loeb, all those guys, like to me, Bale is always the one that captured all the aspects of Batman that like goes from the animated series all the way to like more recent runs like The Long Halloween, and then you have their attempt at Dark Knight Returns and Batman vs Superman that I think did not work because I think that Affleck is just, as despite the fact that Affleck is supposed to be playing a quote unquote older Batman, he's not that old. He was only like 46, 47 when he filmed that movie. So that kind of didn't really make sense to me. And then Pattinson's Batman, who is clearly attempting to emulate the noir tone of the animated series. But like, that's just my stance. So like everybody going nuts about Michael Keaton, I'm like, I get it because people love Michael Keaton as Batman, but just people saying that like that's the definitive Batman, that take I've never understood personally. But I will say the action sequences with him, they were cool. It's still jarring because they're using a ton of CG and a stunt double to cover up for the fact that like 70-year-old Michael Keaton, and the fact that they still have, I'm sorry, I think the costume, especially with the modern day CG, it just looks goofy, especially the scene where he's fighting the big Kryptonian and he's just blowing up bombs at his back and just flipping over back and forth. I'm like, this is ridiculous. I'm like, this is nonsensical. But that's just my thing with Michael Keaton. As far as Sasha Calle, she was good. She didn't wow me personally, just because I just didn't feel like she got that much to do. Like her whole arc was, okay, so she got sent to Earth at the same time as Cal in this reality, but she got the Codex instead of Kal-El this time, and then Zod killed Superman, so now she hates Zod. I'm like, okay, I'm like, that's a pretty good arc for them in a limited amount of screen because I think she's only in like the last 40 minutes of the movie or something. But yeah, I'm like she's fine. But for me, just as far as that the last sequence goes, when they engage in the war, in the Kryptonian battle sequence, like I thought that worked for me personally. Like I said, the only thing that they really changed from the Flashpoint adaptation comic is his final confrontation with Reverse Flash, where he's confronting Reverse Flash because in the comics he originally thinks that Reverse Flash is responsible for all of this, when in reality it's him changing history, and Reverse Flash kind of reminding him of that. And the problem is that because Reverse Flash is hogging the same space as him, that prevents him from being able to go back in time to reset everything until Thomas Wayne kills Reverse Flash and allows him to go back and reset everything, because by that point the Atlantean War, the war is done. They've set up a bomb. The world is going to go boom. Everyone is pretty much dead. The Shazam kids are dead. Cyborg's dead. Thomas Wayne is bleeding out and dying. Wonder Woman's dead. Aquaman's dead. Everybody's pretty much dead. And the thing that I liked that they did is that, like, yeah, Michael Keaton and Sasha Calle, they don't survive, and they actually make that a plot point where no matter how many times they reset it, they can't save them because that's their canon event. They die every time. And like, I was actually impressed. I'm like, wow, like they actually stuck to their guns and did that. And that brings us into the final act, which is our final like third act reveal, when he finally goes back into the Speed Force bubble, which I was, even though the visuals were jarring, I liked the conception of it, where it's literally essentially this giant like hamster wheel bubble in the middle of time and space, where you see like the series of events circling around you in like this stadium-like thing, all in like slow-mo, and he like reverses them by like running backwards and forwards. I don't know if that was supposed to be a take on like the Infinity Treadmill or something like that.
Cosmic Treadmill.
Right, the Cosmic Treadmill. I didn't know if they were doing something like that, but I thought, like, conceptually, I thought it was cool. And it's revealed now that the creation of this reality comes from this new reality, and it's getting into more timey-wimey Back to the Future mumbo-jumbo, where he created this new Flash in this new reality, right, where again, his mom is still alive and everything, but Barry, traveling back in time to this reality, creates this new Flash who, in attempting to stop and reset everything and save everyone, becomes this warped, maligned, mutated, covered in like this charcoal-looking black suit thing, like version of him that is descended from the younger version of Ezra that we see in the movie. And it is only by the younger Ezra sacrificing himself and allowing the older one to kill him that Flash is able to save reality and everything, or at least so we think. So what were your guys' thoughts on the third act? Like, do you think that paid off emotionally? Especially since that's also the scene where we get the big clashing together of the DC multiverse, where we get CG Christopher Reeve Superman, and we get even George Reeves Superman from the 1950s, and Nicolas Cage's Superman, and Adam West's Batman, and all that. So what were your guys' thoughts on the whole third act climax before we actually get to, Barry unfortunately having the emotionally heartfelt thing of having to undo the thing, which is allowing his mom to die? Yolo, we'll start with you this time.
Yeah, so like I said before, I think everything, the conceptual part of it, everything that is set up, it was just let down by the special effects, because like you said, the concept was really good. The bringing all those characters and like the Nicolas Cage that we talked, like Christopher Reeve, all that, it was really powerful. I'm not a big fan, like, because of my biggest problem with the villain and that final scene is, if you're a fan of the TV show, that made me feel like I was watching the TV show. Because
right. He looks like Savitar almost from the TV show, right?
Yeah, it's always like this some kind of guy from the Speed Force that comes back, or it's him, or it's someone, or it's what. And for me, I just felt that I was watching again like one of those TV shows. I wasn't really surprised because as soon as he gets the first knife through his arm, I was like, oh, fuck no.
Yeah.
Are we getting this guy? Because he was keeping coming, and he had a little bit more, and I was like, oh, okay, I'm starting to see where this is going, and I think they could have done that better. But I think the whole concept and how they brought back those multiverse things, it was really well done. Like the final scene was good. I agree with you that like again, Michael Keaton for me is like the best Batman, but having the suit like and having him hold like an old guy didn't really work.
Yeah,
it didn't
and
really
especially
help.
with the modern CG. It's like, oh,
Yeah,
it harkens back to it. Like, yeah, it's like he always complained. He's like, yeah, he looked stiff. He couldn't move his neck. Also, the fact that I'm pretty sure in that first '89 Batman movie, Jack Nicholson has infinitesimally more screen time than Michael Keaton does, which is hilarious to me because that's always been until, ironically, Nolan saved that and changed that. Where again, the biggest joke about the Batman movies throughout the '90s is that the villains always had more screen time, and like they always felt like villain origin stories rather than Batman movies. You know, you don't even see Batman's origin except for the
because
flashback.
that's something that like it was always a thing. Like for example, DC always has like the villains sometimes are more interesting than the heroes itself. And like on Marvel, that's not really the case.
Right.
There are some really good villains, but like on DC, it's like the villains are their biggest strength. Like, so that's when you make a movie, you bring these villains out because they are really interesting. But the thing is, for me, like the Michael Keaton thing that I always wanted to see was that scene in the kitchen when they're fighting, because I always imagine like Batman Beyond and bringing Michael Keaton to play that role of the older Batman. So the thing was, like, in the end, having Batman there, I'm not a big fan, again, of seeing Batman during the light. I think, like, the opening scene shows that suit that is in the beginning with, Ben Affleck.
Yeah.
It's just horrible.
Yeah,
it's like one of the worst. And that's the thing. It doesn't look good during the day. Like, when you have Batman during the day, he looks weird. He always looks weird. So
and
that scene in the
Wonder
end,
Woman insert with the terrible jokes and the last one of truth, which people continue to say is so funny. I'm sorry, the last one of truth, but they're not funny. They're not funny. They weren't funny in Wonder Woman. They've never been funny at all. The Aquaman scene in the Justice League, I hated it. It's never funny. Yeah. It's always cringe. Like Dontre, I know you like it from like a little bit of like a trolling standpoint, but like no, those scenes have never been funny.
No, like
they're
it was trolling. So yeah, it was just like I find stuff like that funny because like they really don't play like a real big thing for comedic vibe, but like it's like trolling. So like I enjoy it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of trolling, this is the last point that I want to talk about before we get into final thoughts. I do want to talk a little bit about Elemental. I don't know if you guys haven't gotten a chance to see that yet, but Eric actually brought up a really interesting point. I just wanted to talk about this first, where he's like, anyone else think it would have been awesome in the multiverse scene to get a universe sphere thing of the Nolanverse? The only thing that I'm going to say to that is, fuck no. Those Nolan movies are sacred to me, and the fact that those movies are as grounded in reality as they are, and not like ridiculous. No, do not touch the Nolan movie. So far, of all the franchises that I love that have gotten like sequels, reboots, terrible sequels, your Terminators, your Godfather, like Godfather, even as a fucking like how it got made show on Paramount Plus, they're making another Apes movie, even though that trilogy was sacred. The Nolan movies are the only ones that they have not touched. They have not touched Christian Bale. They have not touched, Heath Ledger. They're letting him rest in peace for now. And as far as I'm concerned, stay that way. Let them stay that way. Do not touch them. They are a thing in and of themselves. So that's my whole thing with them. I know people still don't like Dark Knight Rises. Whatever. I don't care. I'll defend those movies to the death. But speaking of trolling,
me personally, another idea. I think we had this idea before when we lived together. Another Flash movie they could have did was Crisis on Infinite Earths, and that's just to piss you off. If I was the director of that movie, that's the first universe that's the
first universe that would have gotten destroyed. Of course.
That's the first one, because like me personally, like I have to disagree with both of y'all. I do not like Bale's Batman, and I wasn't really like, I wasn't born yet for the Michael Keaton, but I saw them as like I was growing up. For me, I loved Val Kilmer's Batman.
Oh man, see, you know what's funny about that?
Val Kilmer is like he would be great.
Yes, if he wasn't directed by Joel Schumacher. No, you're 100% right. See,
no, that's what I wanted to say too. Like,
he would be great. He
was in better health condition and things didn't happen to him, that's who the Batman I would have wanted to see
that I'm
in
with.
this movie.
That I'm with, because it's interesting, because that's the thing that I've always said about the difference for me between Batman Forever and Batman and Robin. The reason why I like Batman and Robin slightly more than Batman Forever is because Batman and Robin, all the problems with that movie, at the very least, tonal-wise, it knows what it is. That movie knows that it is a joke. And regardless of how much of a miserable experience it was, everybody in that movie, to some extent, knows that it's a joke. The problem with Forever is that you have Val Kilmer giving a legitimately good performance as Batman in one of the worst directed movies ever, because they are trying to take that movie seriously and it is not working at all. So I'll give you Batman Forever. I do think Val Kilmer is a legitimately good Batman, but you're right. So health-wise, they could not obviously have him back because he has unfortunately lost the use of his voice due to the form of throat cancer that he has. And actually provided like a really touching emotional tribute and one of the only two good scenes in Top Gun Maverick. But terrible movie. Thank you. But this is like Yolo's just like the insider to like what our dynamic was when we lived upstate. But what I will say, so it leads to not the post-credit scene. I think we've talked enough about the post-credit scene. Like we can just let that one die as is. One of the most confusing ending sequences ever, where they are attempting in the original attempt at this movie, I believe, was to show that like, oh, even though Barry reset and fixed everything, things are still not quite what they are, because when he contacts Batman at the end after he fixes everything, and we think it's going to be Ben Affleck, and we see the limousine pull up, and it's George Clooney that gets out. And I'd heard about this. I don't know why I wasn't thinking about it consciously when I went into the movie, but I was thinking about it, and I'm like, I think somebody vaguely mentioned it beforehand, and I'm like, what? I'm like, they would, and then I see him get out, and I'm like, I had three thoughts that went through my mind when I saw that scene. My first thought was, I'm like, is this supposed to be a joke? I'm like, because for the most part, despite your thoughts on the humor, like they've been handling the humor pretty well up until this point. But I'm like, is this supposed to be? I'm like, I legitimately didn't know. I'm sure, like I sometimes don't get certain humor, but I'm like, I don't know if this is supposed to be a joke or not. That was the first thought. The second thought was, I'm like, okay, if they are trolling us, if they are kind of sticking up a middle finger to everybody that's like, if this is their way of sticking up a middle finger and saying that like, yeah, none of this shit is going to come back, because people were like, oh, we were not sure if we're going to see Ezra Miller in the James Gunn verse, if they're going to keep him, if they're going to keep any holdovers. That to me was a pretty significant middle finger that like, yeah, none of this shit is going to come back. All of this is going to get recast. We will never see Ezra Miller as the Flash again, you know? And if we do see Jason Momoa, it will be as Lobo. It will not be as Aquaman. That was the second thought. The third thought, and this is probably where it's going to get the most controversial, the third thought was, okay, so this is what Clooney would have been like as Batman if he had actually had a competent director. I'm not saying it should have been Andres Muschetti, but if he had not been ruined by Schumacher, because there's a universe out there in the multiverse somewhere in which Clooney is a fucking amazing Batman. Because just from a real life standpoint, like George Clooney is kind of everything that you would think of, not necessarily as Batman, but as Bruce Wayne. And if you would just like get like the right director to be able to handle that dichotomy, and there's another universe out there where George Clooney is the best version of Batman that we could have possibly gotten. It just sucked that in this one, he had to be in the second movie directed by Schumacher, which obviously proved to be one of the worst experiences of his life. But I'm looking at that and I'm like, okay, I'm like, I almost see like how this could have worked in a weird way. It's like, I don't know, like there was just so many thoughts and emotions going through my head after a movie that, again, I'm like, I didn't hate, but I didn't love, but I already was like trying to figure out what my relationship was. And I was like, this close, I'm like, okay, I just need to see how it ends. And then that comes in, and I'm like, okay, I'm lost. I'm confused. So like, what were your guys' thoughts on that?
A funny thought. If they were going to do the Clooney thing, I think another FU to like, this is done. They should just brought him out in the nipple suit again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like
we should have got the nipple suit again. And if I would have left the movie like, all right, you know what? They got me. It is
They
what
got,
it is.
they got you. They got you. And it would be like the Captain America scene at the post-credit scene at the end of Homecoming, where they're like, "We know you sat through this whole thing to just see if there's going to be a tease for the next movie, and we're here to tell you that there will not be." Like that's pretty much what this was to me. Like that's exactly what this was.
Yeah, but I think it was pretty obvious that like they can't. No matter how much money this movie would make, I don't think they could continue with Ezra Miller because he's a ticking bomb. You don't know if he's going to kill someone the next week.
It's true.
So I think they never said he was completely out because I think it would hurt the movie even more. People would be like, so what's the point? So I think they kept that. But I think it was pretty obvious, like that a company like Warner Brothers can't have like a guy in a movie that costs $200 million or whatever that might the next day be on the news because he did a cult or whatever. So I thought it was pretty obvious that he wouldn't continue. And the George Clooney, I don't think, like, to be honest, I think you guys are giving too much credit to them. I don't think they thought about any of that. They just thought, how can we squeeze in here another cameo?
Yeah.
And I think you guys are thinking too much on what they're trying to do.
For sure, but I'm just like trying to grapple with my thoughts and processes because it was just so out of nowhere that I'm like, what?
Yeah,
no, like they just wanted an extra cameo, and they're like, where can we stick like George Clooney? George Clooney would never get on that suit again with the nipples. That's why they didn't got him in. Like they probably tried, and it was like, yo, the guys, like I have a fucking tequila that's worth billions. I'm not getting in that suit for nothing.
How much money do you guys think they paid him just for that? Like, what was he on screen for? Like 3 seconds, 4 seconds of screen time? How much money do you think he got for that one cameo?
4 seconds. Listen, I would have paid him $100 million just for 4 seconds in nipple suit. 100 million.
He wouldn't take it.
Half the budget would have went to the 4 seconds of George Clooney in the nipple.
That's where all the VFX money went. That's where all the VFX money went.
Straight practical, real suit, real nipples, like 100%. No CGI, no nothing, just straight that. Yeah.
Oh god.
When I saw that, I said I have to watch that terrible movie again, just to see that.
Wait, did you watch it again?
No, I didn't. Not yet.
and another thing, I have to disagree. George Clooney would never be a good Batman.
No matter what. With a director that knew how to utilize it, you don't think he would have been a good Batman?
No, because the thing that for me works as Michael Keaton is that he's a kind of guy that can play like so Batman, like Bruce Wayne for Batman is the mask. It's like when he's Batman, he's the real guy. When he's Bruce Wayne, he's like pretending. Right. And the thing with George Clooney is he gives me the sense he's the playboy. Always. Like he's not going to be the guy that's pretending. And that's what I liked about Michael Keaton was that he was still good at pretending that part of like, but then you could see how dark he was.
The only thing I will say,
in Bale, he was a fucking depressed guy, even when he was like playing the playboy.
No, see that's where I got a hard disagree because to me, I never ever got the sense from watching Keaton that he was Bruce Wayne. I always got the sense that he was just Batman. He was always nervous. He was awkward. He was reclusive. I'm like, where is the playboy? Where is the mask? Not the literal mask, but the metaphorical mask. And Bale, I got that in every single.
I would say if you, it's kind of like the whole like Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, and Tom Holland situation. I think each actors we've gotten so far to play Batman has played Batman on a specific point. I look at Clooney, I look at the playboy Bruce Wayne.
Right.
I see Clooney, just look at Clooney from like all the other movies he's played in. Exactly. I see the playboy, like, you know, bravado, like sex appeal from Clooney as Bruce Wayne. And I think Clooney would have been better if we would have got like an older Batman situation where he's no longer Batman and we're going to Batman Beyond. Right? Yeah. I think that would have worked.
You know what? You're right.
I think that would have worked.
Yeah.
Bale, I feel like Bale, we got more of we got somewhat more of the detective Batman.
Yes.
But we got the Batman with the gadgets and stuff like that. That's totally fine. And then Michael Keaton, we just got a straight up paranoid brawl.
Yes. Yeah.
But like, and then Robert Pattinson is kind of like, it's going back to Batman Year One where he's like,
Pattinson, I don't think we can speak yet because
he's still too new.
Because he's still like in the beginning. So if they now going forward give him more of the playboy thing, is like goes more into that persona, I think like Pattinson can like kind of still as being the best Batman, because he got the dark part, he got like the look, he got all that. I just didn't got. He got the detective part. I just didn't got like the playboy facade. But
We
that's
need
the
Bruce
thing.
Wayne.
Yeah, Bruce Wayne. But
Yeah.
that's the thing. Like Matt Reeves is really good at creating that kind of like arcs. We saw it in the Planet of the Apes. Like, so I think he's building on to that. He's gonna give him more of like him taking the Bruce Wayne role. So I think he can be really, really good. So
yeah, and to bounce off that
surprising.
point. And to bounce off that point as well, everything that I feel like Yolo, that you were saying about like what Michael Keaton brings to the table, I got that from Kilmer. I got Kilmer way more as like the tortured Bruce Wayne, which is why.
Yeah, but his movies like doesn't let him like.
Again, the movie sucked. That's the
yeah,
problem.
the movie is like a joke. So even if like if you can go and like see the potential there,
it's
I
the
just
power
can't
of Val
forget
Kilmer
everything.
and the fact that Val Kilmer
would be perfect.
Val Kilmer was single-handedly. There's a reason why that guy was not just one of the biggest stars, but one of the best actors that we got in the 90s, where he would just come in, and even in a movie where he's opposite Al Pacino and Robert De Niro with Heat, steal every single fucking scene that he's in. Like, that's how much of a talent he was. And that's why seeing what happened to him with his health just sucks so much, because goddamn were we robbed of a talent. Holy shit. So with all that being
his talent is amazing, but if he's not given a good movie, like for example, The Saint, it's like an amazing concept and stuff, and he can't save if he gives him a bad script, a bad movie. He can't save it. And
I don't know. They always say a good actor can't save a bad script. They always say that. But I'm telling you, man, Kilmer was the only thing that got me through Batman Forever. And he was so good that he was almost enough to convince me that like that movie wasn't complete and total dog shit. I'm telling you, man, it does happen. I'm not saying it happens all the time, but I don't think it happens as often as I don't think it's not like an impossibility is what I will say. So now with that being said, guys, before I do my brief spiel on Elemental and why it is not nearly as bad as people are saying it is, what are your guys' final thoughts and star ratings that you would give for The Flash? Dontre, we're going to start with you.
I really hope that they give this character another chance. I really hate the realm of, we make superhero movies and they completely shitted on. Hence Fantastic Four, why you can't touch certain things anymore. Hulk can't really touch things anymore, but they're going to try it anyway.
Although Marvel got the solo rights back from Universal, so.
Yeah, so that's good. And then just kind of like X-Men, but like honestly, I would have to give this movie like a good like 6.3, 6.5.
Out of 10. Got it.
Out of 10, yeah.
All right, that's understandable. Yolo, your final thoughts and star ratings.
Yeah, I gave it a 3.5 out of 5. So it's kind of like a 7. So it's kind of the same. I just want to like, and don't get me wrong, I would love to see the Flash again one day, but I just love seeing new characters come to life. So I think now DC and Marvel and all that's the thing. They need to give a chance to some new characters. Because especially with everything that comes on with the fans, when it's like these big characters that everyone loves, even before the movie is out, everyone is already shitting on them.
Yep.
So, and like things like Guardians of the Galaxy that no one had a clue what it was. People like couldn't really shit on them because they. So I want to see more stuff like that. So that's what makes me a bit excited about what James Gunn is like saying he's going to do. Yes, we're going to have a Batman, we're going to have a Superman, because
Booster Gold.
Yeah, that's what I mean. We're going to get characters like Booster Gold and Blue
Beetle.
Yeah,
exactly.
Wonder Woman, and we're going to get Green Lantern as like a TV show form, but I don't even know if he's going to do Hal Jordan for that show, Like,
and I think that's what's interesting here. I think like what James Gunn is good is he's very good at not caring what people think. He's very good at not, and I think that's like the biggest advantage that Marvel has been having is that Feige, he has his like vision and he's going to keep with it. Like he's going to listen to what people are saying around, but he's still going to stick to his guns, and he worked out. And I think the problem with DC was that every time some new rumor came out or what people were talking, they would adapt. They would like try and make everyone happy. And we all know that no one is always going to be happy. So I think this movie is a good way to close everything. I think he it couldn't be shelved because it was so expensive. They had to
Yeah.
try and get some money out. And like one of the things that we still didn't talk, like James Gunn is saying the movie is great. Yeah, like James Cameron said the new Terminator was great.
That's true. That's true.
Like,
he said
come
the last,
on, guys.
He said
Like,
the last couple of Terminator movies were
yeah,
great.
so
And
He
there
also
hasn't been
said
a good
Avatar
Ter-
was good too, but
Yeah. Hey, Dontre, does that movie still exist?
that
But
movie
to
doesn't fucking exist at all.
but the thing is that, like, come on, like we need to be understandable. If someone gives you a job, like, you're not gonna go and say, oh, this new thing that's coming out is shit, guys. Like,
I would.
no, you wouldn't. Yeah, no, you wouldn't. Like, look, if someone gives me, like, but sometimes I do my reviews. Sometimes I do my review. Like, I love Thor: Love and Thunder, and everyone was saying, like, oh my god, how much is Disney paying you? Like, I'm telling you now here in public, if Disney pays me to say a movie is good, I'm on for it. I'll take it, because I always
Depends on
like
how
this
much they're paying
shit.
you.
No,
So you
look,
scared of the mouse? That's what you said.
no, like, look, these movies are fun. Like, that's the thing. Like, I
Yeah.
keep saying this as being the old guy. I'm from the time that we would get a superhero like every 5 or 6 years,
Yeah,
and
that's fair.
and,
That's fair.
and it would be like a Punisher, or it would be a
Blade.
horrible movie.
Yeah.
So the thing is, now we're getting all these movies. We should be happy. We're not gonna like all of them, but come on, it's not an Oscar thing like that. Everyone is expecting this movie to change lives. It's supposed to be fun, and that's all I want to say to people. The Flash is a lot of fun, especially in the movie theater. If you go with people that love like DC movies, love comic book movies, it's a lot of fun. Like the special effects do take you a little bit out of it, but you start getting used to it, and you like you go with it, and you see stuff that you only imagine. Like that, I'll keep going on the Nicolas Cage one. I kept like
Yeah.
listening
With
to the
John Peters'
story.
vision of the giant spider too.
We keep. I heard that story told by Kevin Smith so many times.
Yep.
And I always start trying to imagine how the hell would this be, this
Yeah.
movie. And now I got to see it on the screen. So, and that's worth the ticket
of
price.
admission, yeah.
So just go and have fun.
Yeah, to bounce off that point in order to kind of wrap up this my spiel on it. Yeah, I went into this movie with very low expectations, just expecting to like have a good time, and I ended up getting like, for me, the biggest surprise was the amount of emotion and the amount of pathos that I got from it. Again, I was not nearly expecting to feel for the character of Barry Allen, at least as portrayed by Ezra Miller, the way that I did. Again, because I always expected it to be like the comic relief. I'm like, okay, so there's going to be a lot of bad comedy, and I was surprised the most by how and this is going to sound really strange, but how seriously the movie took its character journey, and how it was able to portray and adapt the Flashpoint, and similar to, not to the same extent as Wakanda Forever, but similar to how it took a pretty much doomed movie and was able to make something out of it, while that won't necessarily reflect in the box office. And while, again, to me, this is nowhere near Guardians 3 or Across the Spider-Verse. I think that, no offense, Eric, but I'm sorry, but people who say that this movie is close to those two movies are like possibly smoking crack. But
Yeah, a lot of people say it's like the best movie
Right there.
or whatever.
Right there. So with that being said, this is a solid 3.5 out of 5. This is probably the most confident I've ever been giving a movie 3.5 out of 5. Now, just to pivot real quick, because there was another big movie that we got this weekend that nobody will be talking about at all, because all the conversation is about to be the fly. That's right, we did get Extraction 2 on Netflix as well. Doctor, you got to tell me if this one held up to the first Extraction, if it held up that way. But what I will say is that Elemental for me, for Pixar, as somebody who has been largely disappointed with the Pixar output in the last couple of years. I was a lot of people really liked a lot of the sequels that we were getting from them in the second half of the 2010s. You know, your Incredibles 2s, your Finding Dory's, your Toy Story 4s. A lot of people were fans of those movies. I personally was not. And then moving into the 2020s with pretty much all the Pixar movies being dumped right to Disney Plus as a direct result of COVID, we got three. I'll say two. Well, one masterpiece, one pretty good movie, and one absolute disaster that went right to streaming with Soul, Luca, and Turning Red before they put Lightyear in theaters. It was the first return to theaters last year. And I have to say that now, with their second film officially back in theaters since the pandemic, Elemental which is a metaphor for an immigrant story mixed with a rom-com in the guise of little element spirits. You have like, your fire spirits, your water spirits, your earth spirits, and your air spirits. I gotta say, I was very, very pleasantly surprised. It's not the best movie that Pixar has ever done, but as far as just like really hitting home that emotional core, those really like interesting, like good, like personal themes that Pixar is so well known for, I gotta say, this for me is easily the best Pixar movie since Soul. It's not like Soul. Soul was like kind of one of those like once in a generation kind of a special kind of movies with just how existential and how deep that movie went. This movie is not nearly that deep, but just in terms of like, people from different social classes and different, generations, like getting together and making something, and, quite literally in the form of like fire and water and how they cannot mix. The metaphor is a little bit on the nose there, and the humor specifically was definitely very, very corny. But I gotta say, for my money, I really enjoyed it, and I personally do not understand. Like, I can understand people like not liking it per se, but in terms of people just like saying, "Oh, this is one of the worst Pixar movies that's ever come out," I'm like, did y'all not see Brave? Did you guys not see The Good Dinosaur? Did you not see any of the Cars sequels? Like, am I missing something here? So
yeah, I think those are a few voices, because like on Rotten Tomatoes, you still have 76, and
true.
like
it's just that like I haven't seen a single person really say a positive thing about it yet. And even if they are, they're like, it's really low key, and they're like trying to like almost apologize for it. And I'm like, why? Just say it's a good movie. So I just wanted to throw out my 2 cents there, because I saw that the movie was getting heavily flacked on, and I just wanted to go out there and say, no, this is not only a good movie, this is actually a great movie. And I'll even give myself a little bit more pride, because my sister was this close to taking my niece to see that garbage looking live action Little Mermaid, which I am still boycotting every single Disney live action remake. And I was successfully able to convince her to take my niece to go see Elemental instead, and she succeeded, and my niece loved it. So I'm like, you know what? I'm taking that as a win. I will take that as a win. So with that being said, guys, this was easily probably one of the most entertaining episodes that we've had of the podcast so far this year. We're right about at the halfway point of our summer series. We've only got July and a couple weeks in August left before we wrap up. This has been an absolute blast. Like I said, thank you guys both for being on. Starting with Yola, where can the good people follow you on the interwebs?
So yeah, you can find us on Instagram and also on TikTok. We have also put some stuff on TikTok now, so you can find us there on Instagram, Unyolo's Movies Blog, and we just put reviews. We've been doing some hot takes lately. That it's going well. People are not killing us. So they all started because we really loved Thor: Love and Thunder.
Thor: Love and Thunder, yeah, that's where it all started. Hey, Dontre, I have said this. I didn't hate Love and Thunder. I don't think it's a great movie, but I did have fun with that movie. I did have fun.
I think Taika Waititi is the worst thing that happened to Thor.
Are you guys fans of Monty Python's?
Yes, I am. Okay. I am a big fan of Monty Python. Yeah,
okay.
and that's kind of why, like,
Monty Python comedy.
Exactly. Like that to me was, I'm like, that is Taika just like really doubling down, because like Ragnarok was like they were like halfway there, but like
they
were
still testing the waters.
Exactly. But Love and Thunder, they did not give a fuck, and they just went all out. I loved it. I'm like, he is trolling. I'm like, everybody that hates this movie is not understanding that this is a complete and total troll job. So
yeah, it's a parody. It's
exactly
an absolute parody of Thor.
Which again, but again, understandable why the people who like the serious Thor are not going to be fans of that. But it's like, here's the problem. It's like when Thor was serious, people didn't like it, and then he made it funny, and now he's too funny, and now people want it to be serious again. So this is what we're talking.
People always say we want different movies. It's always the same formula. We want different. We give you different, and everyone
don't like it.
I will say this about the Thor and Taika Waititi and Thor. I have no problem about having jokes here and there, but like I feel like my problem with Taika Waititi is that he doesn't know when to like let the joke die.
Yes, and that is something that I had a problem with Ragnarok. But I thought Ragnarok was notorious for that.
But yeah, and as a person who obviously, again, like it's hard for me to be a person who loves Thor as a character. This is not the realm for, and like again, like I didn't like the Thor movies at all. I would say like Thor is like one of the least movies that I've liked out of the MCU and its Infinity Saga, essentially, because it's just like I feel like that character is not doing it justice. Like, yeah, Thor is a serious character. Yeah, you can have some lighthearted comments in here, but like the joke needs to die. And the biggest problem with Taika Waititi is that the joke just never died, and it just kind of. I didn't like Love and Thunder. It's very hard for me to even sit there and to watch that movie. It's like, again, also just like Gore the God Butcher was Christian Bale, like just got done dirty, and it's just like he was made into a joke as well too. And I was like, that is more of a serious tone. Like that's fucked.
No, so, I completely understand why people wouldn't like. But the thing is, for me, I saw Taika's movies before, like Thor and like What We Do in the Shadows and stuff. That's my kind of comedy. So that's why when he does a Thor movie, that it's a Monty Python movie, and it's like just I understand, and that's the other thing.
The
I'm never
screaming goats. Those are
the
all. Those will
screaming goats is
always-
like
I'm sorry. That was a thing that I thought was gonna get really old really quick, and I just every time they came out, I'm like, it kept getting me every time. I don't know if it was and Taylor Swift with her stupid Eras tour or
no,
whatever.
that for me the
that's
best
even
part
better.
is the hammers that are jealous from it, like that love triangle with the hammers.
Oh,
for
that
me
was
is hilarious.
great. Oh man,
But
Dontre, where
I
can the good
understand.
Dontre, where can the good people follow you on the interwebs?
You can follow me at Instagram at Tarantino.fm, and that's it. So.
All right. You can, of course, follow myself at Movie Nerd Reviews across all platforms. Be sure to follow the official Talkin' TV podcast across all platforms. Subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube. Go give us a follow on Twitch. This episode will be available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts tomorrow. Like I said, as the longest of the summer series and easily the most entertaining that this summer series has been so far. I got to give a shout out to these two. These two really definitely brought everything to the table that I was hoping to. So with that being said, of course, I am once again Dom the Movie Nerd. We will see you guys next week. We're taking a little bit of another off week. Dustin and I are going to cover a couple of movies, then we're going to do our top 10 favorite movies of the halfway point of the year. So for myself, from Yolo, from Dontre, aka Tarantino, 12 seasons in a short film, and watch more fucking movies. We'll see you guys next time.